Javier continued reading the letter. He thanked the Queen for her insight and declared that because of her, they had been able to save their home. He then stated that, as she had already been informed when the White Cavalry sent their letter, 17 estates in the region had been wiped out. As a result, there were many refugees. Most of them were heading toward the Frontera estate. The letter then said that, as a devoted servant of Her Great Majesty, it was only right that they take these people in on her behalf. He added that he would like to be so bold as to shelter Her Great Majesty's people. Javier's face twisted as he read those lines. He thought Lloyd was using the phrase Great Majesty far too many times. The Queen was already getting annoyed. She could tell Lloyd was trying to butter her up before asking for something. Javier continued reading. He stated that they had no money to take care of these people. The Queen's eyes widened. Is he really begging for money right now? How shameless! She thought that she had expected something like this from him, and had already been considering sending supplies anyway. Then Javier read the next line. They would need 3 times the amount of money she was thinking of right now. The Queen recoiled in shock and wondered what was wrong with him. Javier continued, stating that there was nothing wrong with him, referring to Lloyd. The Queen's temper flared. She thought that she would smack him with her aura sword the next time she saw him. The letter then explained Lloyd's intentions. He intended to build a multi-level residential structure, one never seen before in the Empire. It would serve to shelter the families displaced from their homes and provide them with a place to eat and sleep. He states that he believed this was what their great Queen wished for her people. Then the letter stated once again that they had no money. The Queen shouted enough and told Javier that she understood the point. She told him to go back and tell Lloyd that even as Queen, she could not simply summon large amounts of money whenever she pleased. She would need to discuss the matter with her people, and then decide what they could send. At that moment, Javier reached into his coat and produced another letter. The Queen blinked in surprise. Javier read it aloud. It explained that the structure Lloyd planned to build could also be used as a fortress. If there were another attack, it could play a major role in the Empire's defence and help protect the border from enemies. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she considered the words. The letter went on to say that anyone who agreed to the plan would likely find themselves in an envious position. As the words were read aloud, the Queen could clearly picture Lloyd's arrogant face. She thought that it would not hurt to have a fortress city. It could even become a prosperous commercial district rivaling Cremo. If she brought the idea to her ministers, it would certainly improve their loyalty to her and provide a substantial return on their investments. Suddenly, Javier said bingo, as if reading her mind. The Queen blinked, then asked him why he had just said that. Javier replied that he did not know. It simply said to say bingo after 5 seconds in the letter. The Queen frowned. After a moment, she told Javier to wait in the palace while she gathered the funds. She would convince the ministers. Javier then read the last part. P.S. It would be really nice if Master Corgadus could come. The Queen finally lost her temper. She shouted enough already and told poor Javier to knock it off. Over at the Frontera estate, the work on the shelters continued. Officer Gregg was one of the men in charge. Who was Officer Gregg, you may ask? He had been there from the beginning, back when Lloyd forced the lazy soldiers to earn their keep. Gregg had been one of those soldiers. During the duel with Newman, he had also been there, trying to restrain Lloyd from beating him to death. He had even gone on dangerous missions and was once captured by an evil cultist. Over time, he rose to become one of their most trusted men. He was now a transformed man who carried great responsibility. Gregg was helping the refugees when he ran into Emily just outside one of the tents. He told her to remember to take breaks and not work too hard. She told him to stop worrying and said that she could look after herself. They playfully argued while one of the orcs watched from a distance, holding some flowers. Seeing how close they were, his face filled with sadness. He thought back to the time he had told his friends that he liked Emily, only for them to tell him to forget it. that no human would ever like an orc. The orc realised they were probably right. He turned away, dropping the flowers as he walked off. Emily saw him. Her face flushed as she watched him walk away. Later, Lloyd awakened from his sleep, still resting from his exhaustion. Byron was seated by his bedside and asked Lloyd how he was feeling. Lloyd told him it would not be long now, his breathing growing heavier. A worried Byron asked what he meant, wondering if he was seeing the light. Lloyd said it was already here. Payday. Byron's eyes narrowed as he realised Lloyd was not actually dying. Then Lloyd started coughing and shouting about money. Byron tried to reassure him, saying they could delay some payments so he could have more money, but Lloyd just kept wailing. Javier stepped closer, making his way toward Lloyd's room. Lloyd's breathing grew heavier. Then he acted even more dramatic, saying that he might really die this time. He closed his eyes as Byron shouted his name. Byron leapt from his chair, seemingly believing Lloyd's theatrics, and shouted for someone to call a doctor. At that moment, Javier stepped into the room and told Lloyd that he had brought the money and that it was time to get up. Just the sight of the money made Lloyd leap from his bed, activating a special skill, financial healing. That maniacal grin returned as he told Javier that it was time to get back to work. Later, the preparations for the honeypot apartment block were almost complete. Lloyd continued running his simulations, putting the buildings through extreme natural disasters. First came a landslide. The buildings withstood it. Then he simulated a typhoon. The buildings were still standing. He then decided on a final test, a strike from a meteor. The system asked what kind of test this was. Lloyd just laughed, enjoying the cataclysmic explosion from the impact, as the system declared that he had lost the plot. Javier watched as Lloyd laughed like a maniac. Lloyd turned to him and asked what he was staring at. Javier replied that he was not thinking Lloyd had lost his mind. Lloyd scowled at him. Just then, someone alerted Lloyd that Master Corgadus and his craftsmen had arrived. Lloyd turned his head and said it was perfect timing. Lloyd greeted the dwarf craftsmen led by Corgadus and immediately showed them a blueprint of a cement mixer. Corgadus called Lloyd a brat and asked if that was really how he greeted his esteemed guests. Lloyd replied that this was his best way of greeting them, by showing something that had never been built before. Corgadus said that was fine, but asked if Lloyd really needed to have such a devious look on his face. Corgadus walked past him, grabbed the blueprint, and asked if he had properly prepared the building site. Lloyd said, "Of course." Lloyd and Javier worked on the foundation using their mana blasts. Padong ran on a hamster wheel to power the cement mixer, while the orcs bent the steel bars produced by Bangul. Lloyd showed Byron, who was taking notes, how to pour the cement properly, making sure not to leave any air pockets. As the structure grew higher, they used Bibiong like a crane, lifting tools and supplies to the upper floors, while the cheer squad cheered him on. The framework was almost complete. Lloyd asked Byron if he could finish up without him. Byron, ever reliable, told him of course. Lloyd thought that now everyone knew the process, it was time to solve another problem: the installation of the heating system. The apartment complex's heating system would be powered by steam engines. Steam would flow through pipes to the radiators in each room, heating them and warming the area. The problem Lloyd needed to solve was that the higher up the building went, the more heat was lost, causing the upper floors to receive insufficient heat. He ran multiple simulations to try to solve the issue, but every one of them failed. He researched day and night, searching for a better insulation material. When that led nowhere, he racked his brain, trying to think of anything from the book that could help. Then he found it. There was the part where Javier had fought a dragon. Javier had taken a blast of its fire breath head on and come out unscathed. That had been because of the armour he was wearing. It was fortified with the sap of the Alenzia tree, which was said to be the best insulation material this world had to offer. Later, Lloyd and Javier made their way toward the Elven Forest. Not knowing their destination, Javier asked Lloyd where they were headed to find this insulation material. Lloyd told him they were going to the Everglow Woods and that he planned to bring back some sap from the Alencia tree. Javier stopped immediately, turned around, and started walking back the way they had come. Lloyd asked where he was going. Javier replied that elves hated humans, and that they would never negotiate with them. He told Javier that it was fine, that he should just leave his master there and head back, his words heavy with sarcasm. The remark wounded Javier's honour. He clenched his jaw, then turned around and followed as they continued onward. Even so, Javier kept trying to convince Lloyd that the plan was futile. The elves haven't had any outside contact for 500 years. He then asked how Lloyd planned to convince them to give him any sap. Lloyd looked at him and blinked in surprise, asking what he meant. Then he grinned. "Who said he was going to ask for it?" he told Javier. "He said he planned to steal it," his grin widening. Javier glared at him and wondered if he should quit his job. Later, they arrived at the edge of the Everglow Forest. Lloyd told Javier that in just a few more steps, they would be entering elven territory. He then told him that they needed to remain quiet as the elves used the trees to detect intruders. The moment Lloyd finished saying that, Javier sneezed. Lloyd paused and asked what that was. Javier said it was a sneeze, obviously, and asked if Lloyd was dumb. Lloyd scowled and said that he knew what a sneeze was. He then asked if Javier had just tried to look cool while doing it. Javier glanced at him and said that when you are this good looking, everything you do looks good, then told Lloyd he would never know what that was like. Lloyd stared at Javier, wounded by his words, and thought, "Is this guy for real?" The system chimed in, laughing as Lloyd told it to shut up. After Lloyd calmed down, he asked Javier if swordmasters could not control their sneezing. Javier dryly replied that there were certain biological functions that even swordmasters could not control. Lloyd then asked if that meant he could not hold a juice in forever. Javier asked why he would ever want to. Lloyd mocked him, asking what kind of swordmaster could not even hold his dump in. Javier laughed at him. Lloyd demanded to know what was so funny. Javier mocked Lloyd in return, saying that since Lloyd could not make fun of his appearance, he had resorted to making fun of his poop. He added that it was low-hanging fruit, just as expected from him. Lloyd's temper flared, and he started throwing punches at Javier. Javier deflected them effortlessly. In that moment, he felt a strange sense of happiness as Lloyd raged. After Lloyd gave up due to exhaustion, he reminded Javier once again to try to hold his sneezes in. They then decided to continue onward. As Lloyd turned, he saw a group of elves standing in front of them, their bows raised and arrows nocked. Lloyd's face dropped. He said aloud that he could not believe they had been detected so quickly. One of the elves called Lloyd a dimwit, saying that they had made such a racket and asked how they could possibly not notice them. Javier leaned in and whispered to Lloyd that things were getting complicated. Lloyd grinned and told him no. This would only speed things up. The elf gave them a warning, saying that if they did not leave by the count of 3, they would fire. She counted to 3 almost instantly. Then they fired at them. Javier deflected the incoming arrows as Lloyd took cover behind him. One of the elves recognized Javier as a swordmaster almost immediately. Lloyd told Javier that they should split up. He needed to get to a higher position to locate the tree. Javier asked if he would really be fine on his own, all while continuing to deflect the barrage of arrows. Lloyd told him to keep them busy while he moved. At that moment, one of the elves shouted to ignore the ugly one, saying that he was worthless. Tears welled in Lloyd's eyes as he heard the harsh words. Javier ran as the elves gave chase, moving through the treetops. They bounced from branch to branch, using a technique Javier had never seen before. Their steps did not damage a single leaf. As he ran, Javier thought that Lloyd had been right once again. Not many people knew much about elves, but Lloyd had correctly said that they cherished plants and could move through the forest without harming even one leaf. He remembered Lloyd telling him not to attack the elves. They were innocent, and the plan was simply to run and avoid their attacks. Still avoiding their arrows, Javier used the trees as cover. The elves would not dare fire at any plant. They continued to move around him, flanking him from different sides, but Javier dodged their attacks and kept moving. Gradually, irritation set in as he realised they were driving him toward a specific area. Lloyd managed to locate the tree. He made his way close to its base, then activated his skill, Energizer, and began digging a tunnel beneath it. He dug straight down, then shifted toward the tree's direction, hoping to reach the roots. Over with Javier, he was still avoiding the elves, but concern crept in as he could no longer see the elf leader giving chase. He wondered if she had decided to head toward Lloyd instead. Suddenly he burst into a clearing and realised there were no trees left to use as cover. The elves leapt from the treetops, firing a barrage of arrows his way. Javier planted his sword into the ground and released his sword aura. A wave of energy erupted outward, blasting every arrow away in an instant. The elves grew irritated at his strength as they realised that Javier could have defeated them all if he truly wanted to. Another elf told her sister to stay calm. The humans might have swordmasters, but they had a living weapon of their own. Javier heard heavy footsteps approaching from within the dense forest. A massive elf stepped out, her body packed with muscle. She carried a huge bow and arrows nearly as large as spears. Javier knew at once that he was in danger. She released the arrow. The arrow tore up the ground beneath it, screaming toward him at extreme speed. Javier tried to block it with his sword, but the impact sent him sliding backward. He poured all his strength into the parry and barely managed to deflect the arrow into the air. He could hardly believe it. Her strength rivaled his sword aura, and he had only just managed to redirect the attack. He wondered what he should do. Lloyd had instructed him not to harm even a single elf. If he attacked even one of them, it would turn into all-out war. He realised that would be unwise, especially when these people were stronger than even the orcs. Suddenly, the elves brought out another arrow. Javier tightened his grip and gathered his sword aura, drawing as much power into his blade as he could. It was almost time to regroup with Lloyd, and he was certain some of the elves had already gone after him. Another barrage of arrows flew toward him. As he deflected them, Javier wondered how he was supposed to escape this situation and return to Lloyd without harming a single elf. Melika prepared another shot. She fired. Javier released his sword aura, wrapping the energy around the arrow she had fired earlier and sending it flying back toward the incoming one. The two arrows collided head-on. Lloyd managed to find the root and filled a bag with sap. Suddenly, a voice called out from behind him, calling him a demon. He turned to see 3 elves aiming their bows at him, their expressions furious. Lloyd smiled and apologised. He told them that many lives were counting on this sap. He knelt down and slung the bag over his shoulders as the elves ordered him not to move. Lloyd calmly told them to shoot if they wanted. Then he turned back with a crazed smile and said that if they did, he might just turn this little guy into a baked potato. As he spoke, he held a lit torch close to a potted mandragora he had picked up along the way. The elves gasped in shock. Lloyd asked them if they really wanted the cute little plant to get hurt. He told them to step back, holding the torch dangerously close as it cried out in fear. The elves retreated. Disgust filled their faces as they asked Lloyd what was wrong with him, calling him a despicable beast. Lloyd brushed off the insults and thanked them for the compliments, telling them to get back. One of the elves shouted that he was an ugly piece of trash and that he would never know the loving embrace of a woman. Lloyd's face went cold. He moved the torch closer to the mandragora once more, glaring at the elf. The elves jumped back in panic as Lloyd advanced. They made their way to the entrance of the tunnel as the elves asked to negotiate for the return of the mandragora. Lloyd stared at them coldly, then held the mandragora's leaf in his mouth, threatening to bite down. The plant recoiled in fear. He told the elves to get out of the tunnel. The elves stuttered, saying they would, and begged him not to harm the plant. Once they were all outside, Lloyd let out a quiet sigh of relief. Javier should be able to find him more easily now, but he knew that if any more elves showed up, it would be the end for him. Still holding the mandragora hostage with its leaf in his mouth, Lloyd noticed one of the elves begin to gag. The situation clearly turned her stomach at the thought of him eating the plant. Another elf grew dizzy as well, overwhelmed by the cruelty she had just witnessed. The elf leader snapped at them to get a hold of themselves. They could not show weakness in front of the enemy. Then her stomach growled. She hunched over with the others as weakness overtook her. Lloyd looked at the elves, all of them weak and pale, and wondered what was going on. Now that he thought about it, they had looked pale from the start. Their eyes were sunken. He glanced around. There were no signs of animals, no birds chirping, nothing. Then he realised it. The monster Domino had affected the elves as well. The animals must have fled somewhere else, leaving the forest empty. And then another realisation followed. If elves never harmed plants, then their diet must consist of meat. They were carnivores, which meant they had been slowly starving for months. Elsewhere, Javier was still trying to evade the remaining elves. As he ran, he noticed that they were starting to tire. Elves were known for their fitness, and they should not have been growing exhausted yet, he thought. That realisation sparked an idea. This might be his chance to escape. Javier gathered energy within his mana heart, then sent it coursing through his body, forcing his muscles to move faster. He broke away, racing toward Lloyd. Arrows flew past him as he dodged and pushed deeper into the forest, hoping that Lloyd was still safe.